All right, welcome back to coach certification training day 3. And in every one of these, we do the same thing, which is that we go deeper, we go farther, we get more detailed about different facets that we may have skipped or may just not have had time for when we were working together in training itself, or we just give more detail. I'm here to give you different facets of the multiple facets of becoming a coach, learning these advanced disciplines as you're getting certified. And today is, of course, no different. We're going to cover the 3 languages of learning coaching. So the 3 languages of learning coaching. This is an kind of an extra special piece because when you get this, there's something about the process of learning that, or the process of performing, which, you know, any great learning provides you the basis for performance, right? The basis to actually be able to execute something effectively, not just follow through on something, but actually, actually produce the result, right? You can go do something and not actually get the result. There's also different states of mind, obviously, that prevent us from even doing the thing. But many people try certain things or do a lot of work over a long period of time, and they still don't actually produce the result. So a big part of learning is obviously knowledge, and we're going to cover what that looks like. But a big part of especially being trained and learning inside of a training format is also skills transfer. Taking on skills that you didn't have before, having the capacity or the ability that you didn't have before, and then performing it. So it's actually demonstrable. You can demonstrate that the result gets produced when you're the one on the job. Does that make sense? Michael Lynn, good to see you here. Awesome. So this one's exciting because I'll tell you, there have been times in my life, I know, when I wished I had had these understandings, and I had wished that I had had the skills that could have come along with what I'm about to share with you. And when you get this, when you really apply it, when you apply it powerfully, you could just break through so many what you might have thought were limitations. So I'll just give you a comparison, an idea of not just why this is important, but how this actually works. So obviously you've learned different things in your life, right? So now some people say, well, I'm really fast at learning this, I'm really slow at learning that, or I'm really good at this, but I'm not too good at that, right? And the reason why those things occur, the reason why that phenomena shows up, obviously, look, I mean, there are things that are just people are naturally predisposed to, no doubt. A lot of that's actually leveraged on just emotional interests and values, what people make most important. I've seen recently, because it's kind of a political firebrand at this point where people argue about it, is we're talking about women in STEM fields, for instance. And so the argument goes, women actually have just as much or more acuity in, science, technology, engineering, that kind of area, as men do. In fact, sometimes they have more ability, but they're much less interested in those areas. Now, this is, something I'm reporting from somebody else telling me this, so, obviously I could be wrong, but you could imagine why somebody might look like they're better when they're really not any better. They just like that thing more, and they spent more time and energy at it, versus somebody else who, like, yeah, I could totally win that prize as well, but I'm not interested in that particular trophy, because people have different values. So a lot of times acuity and ability and skill sets is really actually driven much more by somebody's own choice, conscious or unconscious, priorities, conscious or unconscious. They might say, gosh, that just doesn't work for me. I'm just not very good at that. But the truth is, they're not interested in doing that. They can care less about that, right? So let's set that aside, though. Let's actually get into what it's like when you really, really want to learn something, when you actually give a darn, and yet you're still slow, and yet you still seem to be inept, and yet you still don't seem to be able to take it on, right? Let's get into that, because that's what we're talking about, not just, when somebody cares more than somebody else. Obviously that matters, and we've talked about that a little bit before. But let's get into the more esoteric aspects other than just like attraction to one thing versus another. So the way I'd compare this when it comes to languages of learning or styles of learning is that you can try to learn to do something, and when you're using the wrong part of yourself, the part of yourself that's really not made to produce that result, it can feel like you just can't do it. It can feel like you're just lost. But if you use the right part, all of a sudden it works perfectly. For instance, when you're brushing your teeth, you wouldn't, most of us at least, would not do that with our feet, right? Because it'd be a lot harder for us. Now, other people who've lost the use of their arms, maybe that's how they brush their teeth, right? Because they learn that over time, right? But for most of us, like using our hands, these appendages particularly, to manipulate fine motor skills and manipulating that object to do something that we got to do repetitively with skill, we're probably going to use our arms, not our legs, or somebody else's arm or something like that. Here's the other thing, though. Try to brush your teeth with like the wrong hand. You can do it, but you won't do it the same way. And it might even be a little bit of a struggle. Another more obvious example is like your writing hand, right? Some of us are left-handed, some of us are right-handed. We write with a certain hand. Try to write with that same level of skill and ability. Try to produce a similar result artistically, or at least with like your cursive or your script with the other hand. Most of us only have the use of one hand with that level of skill, and it's not that we can't do the same things with different parts of our body. It's just that if we do switch parts, we struggle at best, most of us. And look, some people are, of course, ambidextrous. Those are exceptions that prove the rule. The bottom line is, this is what I mean by languages of learning. You have a particular language that you learn through that you prioritize over other languages, just like some people prioritize the left hand over the right. And we can use both, but it's a drastically and radically different level of learning, speed of learning, and ability that we'll take on depending on which appendage we use. So think of these like parts of your body. They're parts that we all have, but we use them with different levels of priority, different levels of acuity, and those acuity levels matter. They radically change how fast or slow you'll learn something. They radically change how you need to learn it, and they radically change whether or not you're even going to learn it long term as well. Does that make sense? So it's a little bit of a metaphor for you. So there are 3 learning languages, as it says here in this wonderful title. And if you want to coach people, you want to understand theirs to help communicate to them, of course. Because if part of your coaching it's not like it's teaching, although I mean obviously you could do that too, but if part of your coaching is reaching out to somebody and actually getting, like, breaking through to them, like getting through to them, you might want to consider getting through to whatever is most likely for them to be able to kind of manipulate what you're saying with skill, to accept what you're saying with a level of acuity, right? If you're talking to the part of them that's like just not really very capable, they might just be really blurry, especially when it comes to more sophisticated aspects of discussion or things that might be a little bit more abstract, levels of abstraction that are maybe somewhat esoteric. So if you're reaching out to them through the wrong language, it's not going to connect, or it's going to take so much time to connect that you won't be worth your hourly rate. We want to make sure that you're able to quickly break through to them, quickly reach them. So you want to be able to understand your client's language of learning, their learning language, so they can access breakthroughs. Your language, your learning language as well, that's your shortcut. It's, think of it like it's your own superpower to raise your level of learning in terms of speed and acuity. So to speak, you might even superpower your own learning, so to speak, during certification. So I want you learning what we're learning here quickly. I want you being able to take it on powerfully and using it and demonstrating it with an immediacy that most people won't experience. That's why, in a 4-week training, we do what most trainings do in like 4 months at best, or usually like a year. It's because we're able to reach you at a different level. And I haven't actually covered this that much in past certifications, but I wanted to get it handled early on in this training because I know it's going to make a difference in accelerating. We're going to use this anyway to some extent, but if you're conscious of it, you can actually be my partner in making sure you're able to onboard this information and onboard the skills as well with even more power. So that's the point with this. Let me give you a couple more examples and then we'll get into the actual, I'll show you a model for this so you can actually see where do I fall? What's my learning language? And then what do I need to do about that? Like what do I change about how I learn or how I approach what I'm learning here in certification such that I'm going to get these results that Jeff's talking about? So I know, and I think I mentioned this before, I kind of alluded to it. I really thought I couldn't learn things for a while in my life. Like some things I was very interested in, right? But, for a lot of areas, I just thought, you know what? I just suck at that. I'm just lousy at that particular area, right? I just can't learn that. I'm just lousy at sports. I'm lousy at math. I'm lousy at public speaking. I mean, there's all sorts of things I thought that, I was very young. I didn't know any better. And of course, there wasn't anybody around me either that had any kind of sense of what this is. I mean, they didn't understand these models. They didn't have a clue about it. Not my teachers for sure. So they couldn't really say anything different than what I said. I mean, they probably wouldn't go along with what I was feeling and thinking because I didn't share it with them. But I'm sure they didn't have a clue as to how to break through to me either. So it was kind of like the blind leading the blind, so to speak. And then I found that I didn't, well, let's put it this way. I found that I needed to get the language of my own learning first. This was years after I first had these experiences of like ineptitude, right? So one example is I remember the first time I went bowling, and so I know, like, I see all these guys and they're just like rolling the ball down the lane, and they'd hit a few pins or they'd strike, or they get a spare, and it just looks so easy. I mean, people just walk up and just real smooth and just look like it was effortless. And I'm looking at this, I'm thinking, I could do that. That's no problem. And so I go over to the ball. I mean, I'm young, right? I'm like probably in my teens, right? And I go over to this ball and I get closer to it, and it starts to look like a lot bigger than it looked like it was, farther away. And so I'm okay, like I got to get the right size ball and the right size for your fingers and everything. And then I start to pick up this, it's this tiny ball, like this mega tiny bowling ball. And seems to fit. I try to pick it up. I'm like, oh my gosh, this thing is heavy, right? So I'm this like little skinny little kid, right? And so then I'm trying to lug this ball up to the lane, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna roll this ball. And the first time I do it, I come back just like everybody else is doing. I can just do what everybody else is doing. I start to to kind of coil up and let the ball down, and it just drops on the floor, right? I can't even hold on to the ball. Right, so I pick it back up again, and I try it again, and I try it again. Eventually, I really think that I didn't even use like the holes for the fingers. All I did was grab the ball and just try to roll it, and of course that doesn't work too well, and it was a complete waste. Now, years later, this is when I can't remember if it was when I was in training or after training, but I was now either being trained by or working for the Tony Robbins organization, right? With my fellow coaches, right? And so we've learned these languages, and we've learned what's possible. We've learned how quickly we can onboard skills and abilities and knowledge, and kind of set our brains up to just work for us rather than working against us. And here we go, we're going bowling again. And I can remember the last time I was bowling, and I'm thinking, oh boy, this last time I tried this did not go too well, but I know what's possible now. I know what I'm capable of, and I'm going to think about this differently. Like, right? I mean, I have the same 2 arms, 2 legs as everybody else does, and I'm going to really make this bowling thing work. So, I got another ball, right? And we're, again, it's like a decade or more later now that I'm doing this. And I roll it a couple times. I get to the point where I can hold the ball. And it's all gutter balls, but at least I'm kind of rolling the ball, right? And then I start to imagine, what? If I use what I've learned, how would I actually get a strike? How would I actually cause this to happen? And I thought back to my languages of learning that I had learned. And I thought, you know what? Obviously, I can roll a ball, but if I'm just rolling it without any kind of goal, without a focus, it's going to go wherever. I mean, you really got to roll it pretty darn straight to get it, just keep it out of the gutter because it's kind of a long lane. And so I just imagine in my mind's eye, I imagine me, walking up to the lane and coiling back and letting the ball go. And just, I imagine watching the ball go straight to hit the center pin. And I just saw that as vividly and as accurately and as precisely as I could in my mind's eye. Like 3, 4 times, like real fast, before I actually went to throw this ball, right? And so I see it and I see it and I see it again. I just imagine going through the motions, and I open my eyes and I see the lane again, just like I had visualized it in my mind. And I went ahead and I coiled back and I rolled the ball, and I actually got the ball to hit these stupid pins for the first time. I can't remember I don't think it was a strike, but like, I was like, oh my gosh, I actually have the ability to get the darn ball all the way down this lane. Nobody had taught me. I didn't have some coach helping me. I just understood, you know what? I've got to make sure that I'm focusing this thing, the ability of, my ability to actually kind of calibrate to where this thing is going. And I got to imagine in my mind's eye before I do it, or else my brain's not going to know what to do. So I learned something there. And by the way, I performed well as a result of teaching my brain, like learning from my own visualization. I was telling my brain, here's what I want you to see happen. Here's what I actually want to see happen. And sort of started telling my body different signals. And I doubt the first, second time this happened, but after a little bit of calibration as to the spin and the way I coiled back, etc., my backswing, well, I don't know what they call that, and I'm not a professional bowler, but it all kind of started to work together. And I just was on a mastermind retreat, about a year and a half ago with fellow members of the mastermind, and these guys are athletes and they're high performance individuals. And so we all go bowling just for fun. And it's like, I beat everybody. I couldn't believe it. I was like, seriously? I'm supposed to be like the most physically inept of this group. I mean, these are people who are like jujitsu masters and professional tennis players and you name it. I mean, these guys understand physical mechanics very well. I mean, none of them are bowlers, but neither am I. I don't go bowling all the time at all. And here I am, actually, having the best points in this little casual game of bowling. And so it made me think, what's the difference between me and them? The difference between me and them is I employed what I had learned that is universal for all learning and performance in this one area that I knew nothing about, and that none of these other guys really know much about either. But because I actually plugged into my language of learning, that actually allowed me to produce this result, it gave me an edge. Now, I'm sure that edge would not last forever if they got some actual support and got serious about this sport. But it showed that it made a huge difference, at least for me personally. I'll give you another example from the business world. I do launches for our programs on a pretty regular basis. If you're on like my email list or you're in any of our social platforms, on a regular basis, I'll reach out to you, let you know, hey, we're about to open up a program. We did that just recently with certification and our ICF associated programs. And when I first did a launch, well, actually before I did launches, I knew about them. I had some knowledge available to me around it, but it didn't seem real. It didn't seem like, can I really do this? Can I really actually have people on a CRM database, reach out to thousands of people at a time and actually get them to respond in some way such that I actually bring clients to me? I actually can actually have people hiring me as a result of the work that we do. And I didn't feel confident that that was possible. I really felt like I don't get this. It just doesn't make any sense. Like, is this real? It didn't seem real to me, and it seemed like it was something that I would not actually be able to do myself. So luckily, I had some time available to me. I took a 1 month kind of virtual vacation, and I went off to Peru, which I actually met my wife in Peru on one of those vacations, and and I spent a month sitting there with my computer, learning this stuff and executing and executing and executing, sending out these emails, setting up some automation, building some web pages, communicating with my webmasters at the time, because you couldn't even really build web pages at that point, and trying to connect all these dots. And then I finally said to myself, I'm just struggling and struggling and struggling with this, trying to do like this really fancy stuff. And I said, you know what I need to do? I need to just experience this working. It doesn't have to work perfectly. It doesn't have to be, the end all be all of these fancy launches that all these other people are teaching. I just need to send out some emails and see some responses. I mean, if I could just do that, I can imagine that I'll get it in my gut. I'll actually feel the difference, and I'll feel more confident, and I can build on that feeling. I can actually get some momentum, get more excited about this, and kind of get a gut feel for how this thing actually works. And then I'll really own it forever if I can really just kind of get the gut feel for it. So I did that. I sent out a couple emails, and I saw some responses, and then I saw somebody actually make a phone call, actually call me, and I experienced launches and what these email campaigns can do, and the power of connecting with a stranger over email that can actually create a real relationship in business. And in fact, we teach this now in Internet Coaching Client Machine. And if you're a student of the Mastery Program or Master Coach University, one of the higher level Master Coach University programs, you're actually going to go through this retreat next year with us, where I'm going to actually teach you kind of the same way I learned, by learning it, by doing it, and experiencing the difference that it makes. Totally changed my life to actually do that. But I had to experience it. And without that, I could have visualized it till I was blue in the face, and it wouldn't have helped. And now, even to this day, like, I get what's going on there, and I can move lightning fast around different launches and different automation systems and different ways to flow leads to now my team, because I built a team around this now. I'll give you one other example actually from present day, because these are from like far in the past. Here's one I'm actually going through now, because as you might imagine, learning never stops. And I hate to be a hypocrite and expect you to learn a bunch of new stuff, and I'm not. Not to mention that I always have another level in my life that I'm going after as well. So, I've been an investor for almost 20 years now, probably around 20 years. And I've always been a saver, not always, but last 19 years or so, I've been a pretty decent saver. I save every single year from whatever I'm making, right? Because I want to be responsible for my financial future and the financial future of my family, and I want to be a good steward of my resources as well. So I've always done that, and lately I've noticed that my kind of generic S&P 500 kind of savings and investment has gotten to a critical mass that's actually starting to snowball a bit. And so I said, you know what, it's been a while since I've really been serious about maximizing my returns. I've just kind of set that on autopilot for a while. So I really want to master finances. I want to master not just like saving and investing some money and making sure that I don't go broke and I'm out of debt. Like, that's one level of mastery, but I kind of have that handled. Like, I don't have any real debt, and I'm not struggling to save in any way. I add value on a regular basis, so I make money, and I support my family in that way, among others. So at the same time, though, I want to make sure that in the next 10, 20 years, as I move on to a more full-time investor, as I move on to retirement, as I moved on to maybe not just working for money full-time, which I'm totally happy to do, especially in the profession I'm in, I really want to make sure that my money's working for me, that I'm a master of my money, that my money is not my master, right? And so I said, okay, I got to sit down. I got to figure out what makes a safe investment, what makes a growth investment, what makes an investment that yields really great returns for me so I can actually have income. Because one of the challenges that people find is they invest for years and then they retire and then they just get this lump sum of cash out of their like retirement accounts. They cash in and they just got this cash and it dwindles away and then they die broke and then their family's broke too as a result of that. And I'm like, I want more for my family than that. I want them to have something after I'm gone. I don't want to just like eat into my principal and have nothing left. I want to have a legacy financially, not just like emotionally, spiritually, and when it comes to like passing knowledge on to people, right? So I said, how do I do that? I've got to have safe investments. I've got to have investments that grow, but I also have to have investments that throw off cash to me. And any decent asset class, like stocks, for instance, or real estate, any decent asset class is also an income vehicle. Stocks have dividends, real estate has rent, you know, if you're a landlord. So no doubt I can actually generate cash as well. But I got to really master this stuff in order to do it at the level I'm committed to. So I said, okay, I got to sit down. I got to learn how to value companies. I got to learn how to invest beyond just the generic S&P 500 so I can get a couple extra basis points here on my returns. And I also want to know that if I'm going to invest in individual stocks, so if I want to run covered calls or some kind of fancy option spread, which I know actually how to do, but I'm just not at the point right now where I feel safe enough to do that with mastery, right? So I want to be able to value companies. I want to be able to invest in these companies safely. Asset allocation, I need to have that handled. I need to appreciate the macro picture. And I also need to be able to then proceed accordingly and experience good results with this, which I haven't always experienced. And so I started to study this last like 6 months or so, like pretty deeply. And I'm looking at finances. I'm looking at all these correlations between different asset classes and how they work and how to value them and how to invest in them and how to make sure you're not losing money as well. And I wanted to really appreciate all of it and be able to make it actionable. And I was just lost for a while. I was just like, this doesn't make sense. I mean, like the dollar goes up and stocks go down. What? That doesn't make, like, why would that happen? And then like, wait a second, bonds go with stocks except when they don't because interest rates are higher. What is, like, that makes no sense. And then like, why would you be happy if this investment that you're doing dollar cost averaging and drip investments with, why would you be happy if that goes down? Like, and people are saying this is great. And so I'd like, this is confusing stuff, right? I don't know if you've ever been confused in that way in a subject like in math or in English or finances, for instance, or coaching for that matter. But I mean, I think all of us have been in that place at one time or another with one subject or another, one domain or another. So I definitely was experiencing that with finances. This was not exactly a new experience for me either. You know, I remember the first couple times I looked at like cash flow statements and balance sheets and that kind of stuff, and I would just stop breathing and I would like want to throw up. Because it just was like, so what? What are these numbers? Like, how do these matter, right? And so I finally started, luckily, I was watching a bunch of educators, financial educators. Most of them would just talk in Greek. You turn on CNBC, it sounds like Greek to me, right? I found one guy, though, that started explaining these correlations, started explaining these relationships, and started saying, look, the reason why this goes up when that goes down is because people want this. They want, like in bonds going up versus stocks going down, like people want a return, they want a cash yield. And so a lot of the money goes to bonds as long as they can get 3 or 4%. But if they can't get 3 or 4% and interest rates are low, stocks go up because that's the only place they can get any kind of return at all. And so that's why that happens. And then when yields are higher, stocks and bonds will go together because, you know, return is not as big a deal. I was like, okay, that actually makes sense. So people want to do this because there's a reason for it. That's why these two things are correlated. And the reason why like Bitcoin is correlated with the stock market is because they're the same investors that invest in both. And when they feel scared, they pull their money out of both simultaneously. I was like, okay, that actually makes sense. So there's all these different types of investments, different asset classes that different people are playing along with. And it's kind of like this river of motivation that's happening based on what's occurring in the world right now. And there's all these events in the news that like cause people to react to it, and you can chart that out and watch it happen. And I started to think, okay, I can see why these things relate. I can see why it's happening, not just that they do. And suddenly I started to feel more confident because I'm like, wow, if I can watch the different things as they go together, I can understand what phase of the market we're in. I can understand what assets I should be looking at. I can also understand why. And this applied also to lots of different other domains of what I'm just talking about. I won't go into more detail because it doesn't even matter. But does that make sense? Like I started to connect those dots. So that's enough examples. Let's get to the models here. So I'm going to share with you these three languages of learning now that we've taken all this time to this little preamble here. So I've oversimplified this because I had like about 3 minutes to write this out today, but you're going to get it and I'll add some notes. Let me get some red here. So these are the three languages of learning. They're very simple. Some people learn by visual acuity. They learn through a representational system. They represent things in their mind visually. They see it clearly or they don't, right? They make a picture of it and therefore they get it. They see how things relate. They have to map it out in their brain. Now, sometimes they'll visualize this in 3 dimensions, like with pictures. Sometimes they'll visualize, like if it's numbers or words, they could visualize the numbers and words coming together. But people will build maps in their mind. I remember this story that some of my trainers used to explain to me around, I think it was Tesla or one of those early inventors. And what he would do is he would imagine a motor. Before he built it, he would imagine building the entire motor and putting it together, and he would run a simulation in his mind visually of this motor running. And he would watch the motor break. He would watch it fail. And he would see why it failed because his visual acuity allowed him to see like the intricacy of that system. And he would see the piece that didn't work and he would pull it out, repair it, and rebuild the motor totally in his mind, right? Now, obviously not everybody's got that skill, right? But he was a visual learner. He could do things that most people would think it would be genius because he could see it in his mind's eye. He could see it, he could make a picture of it, and he was in that language of learning, right? People that are in this language of learning, that they're not offered that particular area of knowledge or skill set or performance domain in a visual fashion, they'll say, I don't get it. I can't see it. That's not clear to me. It's really vague. They'll say things like this, and it'll give you a clue that they're a visual learner, that they literally see things through the visual spectra, so to speak. So if you're a visual learner, chances are you move really fast. You can talk fast because your speech is trying to keep up with the pictures in your head. Now, this may not be something you're totally conscious of on a regular basis, but whether you're conscious of it or not doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So if you move pretty fast, you speak pretty fast, or if you kind of imagine things in pictures, if you're conscious of that, you're probably a visual learner, or at least you represent reality through the visual spectrum. And so people who are visual learners, they're really good at learning from other visual people who talk really fast and show really pictures and say, hey, is that clear? Can you see this in your mind's eye? Right? And they connect and they build models like this, right? I draw you a picture because I know some people are very visual. This actually is more attractive to you. If you're a visual learner, you're like, okay, I think I can get this. There's a little pyramid. There's different variations here. There's 3 domains. I get it. Now, if I just told you that and I just, like, this wasn't available to you, you might say, okay, that's interesting, but I don't really get it. But we're going to draw this map for you visual learners out there. All right, so that's the visual side. Now, some people are auditory learners. Now, auditory learners are really actually split into 2 categories. One is literally like more of an auditory learner, like they learn from sound. The other one is what we call a digital. Let's see if I can write on this side. A digital auditory, which means that they actually learn in words. Like they imagine themselves saying the words in their head, or they hear someone else say it and they they have a little typewriter in their mind, and it puts the words together, so to speak. And they don't even see those words, but those words kind of, they show up kind of on an auditory level, right? So whether you're auditory from kind of hearing the sound or auditory from hearing the words, you're probably more of an auditory guided person. You learn auditorily. You need to hear it. It's got to click for you. It needs to be something that you can talk about. So what's one of the reasons why we have your master coaches meeting with you in groups is so you guys can talk more about this. Because I know part of the learning for auditory learners is you need to be able to hear people talk about it, but not just me. You need to talk about it yourself so you can put the words in order, so you can hear it, so you can make it sound good for you, right? This is all the auditory spectra of representation. We can represent information, knowledge, and abilities auditorily, right? So some things are perfect for this. Coaching is a great place, a great skill set to learn auditorily, but you may not want to learn every aspect of coaching auditorily. So for auditory learners, I'm going to talk to you. We have long conversations. I know these go longer than the visual people want them to go. You'd say, hey, I could have learned that in half the time. But for auditory learners, this is going to take a little bit more conversation. I need to talk to you in the chat digitally, right? And we need to go back and forth a little bit. So that's why I encourage this in certification. So that's auditory learning. This takes more time. Does that make sense? It's like pictures move fast, words are a little slower to hear it. Sound is, slower than light, so to speak. Now, there are some people that they really got to experience it in order to learn it. They need to kind of feel it in their gut. And for these individuals, they need to learn what I call kinesthetically, which is just a fancy way of saying they need to learn it via their feelings. They need to tap into those feelings and actually feel what it feels like to coach, feel what it feels like I did to run a launch. Remember when I said when I was running that launch and I couldn't figure it out, it was just kind of, I would get lost in the pictures of it because this guy was a visual teacher. He showed mind maps of everything. And he had a lot of auditory things like a lot of word strings. And I was like, I got to experience this. And so I just did a few things very simply, not perfectly, and I actually experienced it happening, and I felt wholly different about it because in that area, I was more of a kinesthetic learner, and I had to get a good feeling about it before I could move forward. Does that make sense? So if you're talking to somebody and they're like, this doesn't feel right to me, or, I can't grasp that, or, I'm not sure I understand it deeply enough. Or like one of our team members says when I'm trying to train her, I'll give her all the information. I'll show her a picture of it. I'll do it auditorily. And I say, you got any questions? She'll always say, no, I think I just have to do it. Right? And she's like half there when I'm training her in those ways. But I know if I give her the map for it and, she kind of listens a little bit, then she can go experience it. And even if she crashes and burns, now she's got questions. Now she's got the mistakes that she made, and I can hold her hand with it. If you're ever like a coach, like you're training somebody or you're coaching them and you got to hold their hand. You got to be right there with them. That's a kinesthetic learner a lot of times. Holding their hand will have them feel doing it. It's like, I remember the first time I ever learned like a little bit of carpentry. My dad was in the workshop and he had the hammer and he's hammering and he's like, go ahead, hammer it. And I'm like, I pick it up and I'm like, I'm going to crush my thumb or something. And he said, okay, you know what? Let's stand behind you. I'm going to hold your hand. We hammered the nail together. Right. And it was kind of dumb. It was not really the most, the fastest and most effective technique for hammering, but I felt it. And even to this day, you give me a hammer and a nail, I can hammer that nail in, right? So some things in life, some things that you can learn, you really just got to feel them. So you're either more of a kinesthetic learner, you got to experience it, feel it, learn by doing, as I like to say in Master Coach University. You might be an auditory learner or an auditory digital learner where you need to hear it, you need to talk to people about it, you need to explain it. You need to be able to make sure that it sounds right to you and that it all kind of clicks together. You can hear the way that all this would kind of resonate for you. Or you might be more of a visual learner where you got to see it clearly, get the pictures of it, and line all the pictures up. Make sure it's in 3 dimensions, it's bright, it's right, big, bright, and right out in front of you, and in lights, and that you can like draw that. You can paint the picture to make sure others see the light and they all see clearly. You get the idea of these different words that people use unconsciously that represent these different languages of learning. You'll hear it in your clients. You will actually hear it in your clients when you're talking about things that they're like wrestling with. And by the way, somebody says they're wrestling with something. What language of learning might that be? When I'm wrestling with it. Well, I'll give you a clue. It's not visual, right? Its chances are kinesthetic because they're feeling it. They're wrestling with it. They're grappling with it, right? Make sense? So these are the 3 different languages. Now, a couple different important things to understand about the ups and downs of these. With the higher we go in these learning languages, the faster you'll learn. Okay? So part of this is speed. More visual is faster. Auditory is faster than kinesthetic. And finally down here, we are slow if we are kinesthetic. This doesn't mean we're stupid, we're just slower. Right? It takes more time to get something in your gut, to get the feel of it, right? You might need to do it and experience it, right? Rather than just see it. Beyond that, it also, now there's some strengths around kinesthetic learning, speaking of kinesthetic pieces. Once you get something kinesthetically, this will last a long time. So let's just say this lasts. This lasts longer. When you can get something kinesthetically, you'll never forget it. Like riding a bike. You can visualize riding a bike all you want. You could talk about it all you want. You could discuss it. You can imagine the sounds of perfectly pedaling that bike all you want. But until you actually ride the darn bike and you get it in your body, you will never be able to ride that bike. Plus, once somebody does it and they can feel it, not just like see what it looks like for somebody else to do it, we can get on a bike like decades later and we can still ride. And I mean like instantly, like it's almost like we never stopped riding. You never forget. Why? Because there was somebody that when we first learned, they were holding our hand. They were teaching us kinesthetically. Mom and dad, or whoever it was, brother or sister, they somehow knew intuitively, riding a bike, you just got to do it. You got to feel it. You got to feel the balance in your body. I can explain balance. Hey, balance is the 2 different forces of the gravity pulling this way and that way, and then when you're balanced in the center, like that doesn't matter at all when you're riding the bike. That's not learning. Riding the bike is learning. So kinesthetic learning lasts longer, and visual learning usually is fairly short-lived. It's a short pop. Now, you can recreate that picture in your mind again, but a lot of visual people don't. They'll move on to the next picture. They'll say, yeah, that worked. Anyway, let's move on. And then they forget this, and it goes away, and then they got to learn it again and again and again because they didn't really learn it. They didn't learn it beyond their visual spectrum, right? They didn't get it in their body, right? So it's great. You can learn fast, but it might be short-lived learning, and all of a sudden you forget it, and you come onto a coaching session where you got to use what you learned a year ago, and you really didn't learn it. You don't really own it because you're not being it kinesthetically, let's say. Okay? So these different areas could be used for different things as well. Like, remember I was talking about learning the bowling? Like, part of that's kinesthetic, but if I didn't visually imagine where that ball was going to go, my kinesthetics were just feeling it right here. I had to see that ball where it needed to go to connect my visual with my kinesthetic. So it was a see-feel. I had to do this number 1 and this number 2 in bowling, right? And like in coaching, a lot of times there's an auditory aspect to it. Right? So like the words you're going to use and how you'll use those words, not just the feeling of it. So there's different elements of what you're going to learn in certification that is going to demand of you that you move into one of these representational systems that may not be your home base. But I challenge you to move into a visual mode. See things in your mind's eye. Make pictures of them. Draw the picture. Draw the model. right? Imagine it clearly, brightly. Move that picture close to you. Move those pictures quickly and see how they flip back and forth. Make the picture into a movie as we did this week, right, in training. So that's visual spectra. Auditory, you might need that, like I said, for actual coaching because you're going to actually have to talk to people eventually. How does that sound to say it this way and actually have it work? What's the difference between the auditory, the tone of accountability versus the tone of strategy work or assessment work in those different domains that we're going to be learning, right? What words do you need to memorize? Do you need to remember? Do you need to actually be able to get yourself to say and hear? Because there's certain very specific aspects of auditory learning that you're going to have to plug into, right? In order just to be a great phone coach, if not a coach that's going to be face-to-face as well. And then finally, what things do you need to learn by doing? All of it, of course. But more importantly, are there certain types of coaching where if you can't feel it in your gut, if you can't like intuit it through just like kind of having an experience of that client before you actually make a decision and visualize and share it with somebody, you're going to have to get it in your gut. You're going to have to get it experientially, right? Strategy coaching, if you can't go kinesthetic to any level, you're not going to be a very good strategy coach because you're not going to be able to feel your client and feel what their strategy is internally. And you'll always just work with them on superficial strategies that probably won't totally transform their life or the area where they're stuck. When somebody, by the way, says they're stuck, usually the reason they're stuck is not because they can't see the answer or because they can't talk about what they should do. It's because of the feeling. We call it stuck because it actually feels stuck. It's like we can't move. And movement is usually a physical thing, right? So when you hear people talking about what's holding them back, what's preventing them from getting what they want, what they're challenged with, what they need and what they want, or when you actually give them some answers, when you work with them on breakthroughs, what they're, again, having challenges with around that breakthrough. Are they wrestling with the breakthrough kinesthetically? Are they unable to make it click, or they're not sure how to describe that breakthrough, or they need to talk more about it? Or are they not seeing it clearly yet or brightly enough? Like the future is not bright enough yet for me, right? So if these different elements that are keeping them stuck or keeping them challenged or that are preventing them from actually having the breakthrough and onboarding the learning that you have to offer them are in their way, and you can get a sense of what spectra they're having challenges with, talk to them in that area. Work with their pictures. Work with talk to them digitally, or get them to get it to resonate for them. Let them talk it out, or have them go practice it. Have them do it. Actually work with them like we did this week around the state of mind of it and the feeling of that, what it would feel like if they were to actually have the breakthrough, so to speak. Is this making sense? So that's how you might work with your client on this. And again, eventually you want to, even if they are visual, get them to go kinesthetic to the point of them actually owning the breakthrough forever. That's what makes the change last a lot of times, not just having some picture in the mind's eye. Now, for you, in the areas that you're working on, these disciplines that we're practicing, think about what area do you need to plug into better so that you can learn faster, but also imagine what's the area for you? Like how do you generally learn? If you're kinesthetic, you better be practicing a lot more coaching than anybody else in the training around you. You're going to need to really get the feeling and think of what's the mindset of this? What's the feeling of this? What's that in my gut? How would that feel? And really map that out for yourself. You don't even have to write it down. Just spend time like meditating on it, right? Auditorily, you better be in those master coach groups. Talk about it. You want to be talking a lot, listening to other people discuss it. You want to write those words down. You should be taking a lot of notes if you're digital as a learner, right? Type it all out. Read it over and over again, right? That you need to be engaging auditorily. That's a great place to be coaching-wise, but you want to get the language of transformation in that particular domain. And finally, visually, if you predominantly learn visually, anything I'm telling you, like I know I draw you some pictures, but I'm not that visual, so it's not nothing but pictures. So you want to actually make your own pictures, your own models, your own hierarchies, your own kind of graphs of what we talk about here, so you can map it out, stick it on your wall, and then you get it. then it's yours. You really own it, at least visually. Visualize yourself doing things. Visualize the successes. Because if you're learning visually, your brain and body and words will kind of come along for that ride a lot of times. So use the primary learning language that you have to engage first. You know, spoon feed it to yourself. I mean, let's not make it hard on you. And then ask yourself, what other area do I need to use as a support system, as a support learning language to modify or accommodate what else is needed from me to go beyond my particular kind of narrowly focused learning system. Now, people do combine these, there's no doubt. But more often than not, people get glued to one of them more than anything. And they just kind of get stuck there, speaking of being stuck, and they don't transform themselves into these other areas. And the truth is, you're not any one of these things. It's not just like, oh, you're just a digital auditory learning language, and that's all you can do. Your brain can go visual, you can go kinesthetic, you've done it in the past, chances are. So get yourself more limber and agile so you can move like up and down the spectrum whenever you need to, for two reasons. Number one, because you need to be able to learn these different ways, and you need to be able to plug into these different ways in order to be a high performance individual. Secondly, you need to be able to be agile to move where your client is as well. If your client is kinesthetic and you're visual, you may move so fast, they're like, I don't get it, slow down, right? Or they won't feel it because you're talking about how they should see it. So you need to be able to move down into kinesthetic and be feeling with them. It might be excruciating for you, but you need to have that agility and that ability as well. Does that feel okay for you to do that? Can you hear what I'm saying? I mean, does this make sense, like in terms of the logic of it? The words I'm saying, I mean, do they connect? Or can you see it clearly? Can you get the pictures in your mind? Can you see those as a movie? Like you can see it in 3 dimensions, like totally with full color right in front of you on a big screen. I just went through all 3 rep systems and I was going much slower when I was moving in the kinesthetic spectrum, because I know I just really need to feel that, or else those that are kinesthetic learners, man, they'll never connect with what I'm saying. They're going to need to feel me at that level. But auditorily, I'm going to need you to talk in a way that you can really hear, that's going to sound right to you, and that's going to resonate for you, that's going to click for you, that's going to be in the right tempo, or that's going to give you the right words so that the meanings make sense. And then finally, visually, I need to move faster because those images are moving faster, just like you are right now, and you're going to go way faster than I am if can't keep up with you and actually get riding a bike is kinesthetic, but you can see what it looks like to ride a bike. You can make a picture of it first, and then you can go feel it later. Get it? We can move up and down these spectrums, and you need to have the agility to do that for yourself in learning and going high performance, and then for the purpose of interfacing with your client, who's going to have a different learning style a lot of times than your style, different learning language, so to speak. So I'm going to offer you 4 learning filters that have nothing to do with these and some of the pitfalls of those, and I'm going to give you a few marching orders here to take on around the model that we just talked about. Because you should, with what we just talked about, be able to accelerate your learning by plugging into your spectrum first, making it kind of spoon feed it for you, and then expanding out from there so you can have a little synesthesia here, and you can have your entirety of you, visually, auditory, and kinesthetically, see, hear, and feel, and ultimately experience the full performance of anything that we talk about. So you're an entire human being, not just like one part that you selected long ago because it was most comfortable for you, or you saw it clearly at that moment. Make sense? All right, so 4 learning filters, and I didn't even write these down, I didn't have time. So some people are what filters. So they just want to know the definition of things. They want to know, what is that? I want to understand what that means. They just want to know what it is, right? And people who are just in the what world, a lot of times they're not very effective because they more just try to explain things to people from a definitional perspective rather than actually using it to produce a result. So that could be very challenging. Although it's good that because they usually get clear on, like, putting things in their place, so to speak, and categorizing them. Some people are why learners. So they just want to know, why do I need this? Why do you need to know this? Why do you need to use this, right? Now, these why learners are great because they get very motivated once they get the why. If they can't connect the why, a lot of times they never experience what they need to learn, though. So you always want to look for the why if you're a why learner. Beyond that, though, understand that you may not actually use what you learn either because you're so motivated with the why, you might just give it away to somebody else, sell somebody else on the idea, then move on. Sometimes it's good to actually experience it before you pass it to somebody else, just from a perspective of being able to powerfully train them and teach them and coach them. Now, some people are how-to learners, and these guys are usually the implementers of the world. They do and do and do. The challenge for them is a lot of times they can't get anybody else to do because they're so busy executing themselves. They end up being kind of a jack of all trade, master of none, not to mention they usually don't do a very good job passing the information on to other people, not because they can't teach you how to do something, but all the other learning styles are like, okay, great, but I'm not going to use that because they don't understand why, or they don't get the what of it. And so how-to people, very valuable people to have on your team, but sometimes it's challenging for the how-to people to pass on knowledge, pass on skills, and make things usable for everybody, not just for other how-to types. And then finally, there are what-if style learners, and these people are the visionaries. They just live in the future. They imagine speaking of visual, they usually visualize what the vision of using whatever they're learning might look like, and they never get off the starting blocks, unfortunately. They're usually very inspiring people. They usually get along with why people because they can talk about the what-if, and the why people like that too. But they have trouble bringing themselves back to the present, getting grounded in the present, and actually using what they know beyond just being dazzled by it in terms of the future vision of it, so to speak. So just be watching for these pitfalls. Are you a what type and you just get stuck in categories and definitions? Are you a why type and you're very motivational, but you kind of scratch the surface of things and don't really experience it yourself? Are you a how-to type that really gets on the ground floor, but you never go up a level? You never train others. You just do it yourself. You're a DIY type of girl or guy. Or are you more of a what if? That's more of the vision of things, the future possibilities, and just the creative insights of things, and you don't get to the ground level of actually following through on it. Somebody actually said this makes sense. I love it. Connected the dots for somebody in the visual spectrum or in the auditory spectrum. Who knows what it is? But anyway, those are some of the pitfalls around different filters that people have, and these filters also go right on top of and around visual, auditory, kinesthetic. So you can be a kinesthetic what type, and you feel the definitions of things and what they are. You could be a visual what if type, and you visualize the ideas. You visualize the creativity of it, but you don't get past that. You're a visionary, but you're kind of a loony visionary, right? A nutty professor. So when you combine these different filters with the spectra, the learning language that you have, you can really get a sense of exactly what you need in order to comfortably learn something. And then again, also what else you might be missing, so you can move beyond that and you can expand yourself to the total person that you really could be if you plug into these other areas as well. Really, really good. All right, so that you say, I'm visual and I'm motivational. Yeah, so possibly a what if or a why type, right? And so it's really, really great to sell from that perspective, especially to other visual buyers. You're going to be more of an influencer, right, and inspiring. And then you might either want to hire a coach that's more of a how-to type to fill in those blanks and to help people pound the nail in, or maybe even a more of a kinesthetic auditory type that at least will talk about it more with the people that are like, yeah, I was excited by that guy, but now what do I do? How do I actually use that, right? So we can actually notice where our missing pieces are, and we can use that team-wise, or just find our own missing piece and get it inside ourselves so we can be, again, like I said, more agile in the process. All right, so here's the actions. Here's the last piece to get today, or 3 things to do for you how-to and what-if types as well, because that want to know the first action, the next thing, what's next, if you will. Number 1, use your main representational system to learn during training. Number 2, Know your pitfalls. Know the pitfalls that we just talked about, and write those down. Get those clear for yourself. Feel them fully, or at least see them in front of you so you can get them out of your way, or so you can actually kind of, learn the area that seems like it's weaker for you, so you can get more comfortable with that, so you can get more agile with that, so you can get more facile with it. So use your main system here, visual, auditory, kinesthetic. Know your pitfalls, and then finally, practice. Practice actually learning something using other representational systems than what your home base is. Just fool around with it. It'll really mess with you for a while. It'll probably be like, whoa, that's crazy, like you're on drugs or something. But that's what we're after in a way. It's like to alter the state of mind that you've been in, shake you up a little bit. And again, that may not be easy. It may not even be that comfortable, but we can build on that if you start putting some basic building blocks in place to the point where that actually could become kind of a strength for you, and work with your clients on what kind of learning they are plugged into so you can interface with them at their level, at their speed, and in their world. If you can't enter their world, you're not going to be able to reach them. All right, really, really cool. So any other questions about this? We had a bunch of chats coming through. All right, good, Lynn. I'm glad you're getting it too. Awesome. Structure is what Coach Terry is helping me with. All right. Very, very cool. Yeah. So structure could be like, the structure visually if somebody sees it, or it could be the structure kinesthetically, like feeling what that build out would actually feel like, right? So depending on the representational system, it could mean a couple different things. All right. Really great. Use this stuff. And by the way, especially if you're watching on YouTube, but anywhere, the way that our platforms where I'm reaching you on actually can help us make this kind of impact for other people that are actually literally being stuck in the same areas is through two things. Number one is you liking whatever button that might be. So like our AI overlords nowadays can actually realize, hey, that's pretty good because people actually said that was good, right? The second way is just by sharing it with other leaders, sharing it with other coaches, sharing it with other influencers, sharing it with managers, sharing it with the people that are leaders in your life, the people that need to understand this stuff so that they can reach you at a different level. A family member of mine walked in on me like 10 minutes before I was doing this, and they were like, hey, you need to listen to me about this. And I was like, I'm busy. And they're like, well, I would do this for you. And I was like realizing that they were making a picture of the way it should be, changing it from the way it really is, and then I was not feeling it, right? And so there was a disconnect there, but the disconnect wasn't just like them getting what they want, although obviously we could relate to that too. It was visual versus kinesthetic. And I wanted them to feel me where they wanted me to see it their way. Does that make sense? And so if you're in disagreement land with somebody, if you're challenged with reaching somebody, or you feel like they can't understand you, maybe there's a disconnect between these different areas for you too, or you and a team. And you can reach them so much more quickly when you're able to move in their direction. Because look, they may not know this, but if you share this with them, maybe they can figure it out. That might be helpful. And so really, I would totally appreciate it if you do that. If you like, and by the way, if you're on YouTube especially, if you subscribe and hit the bell, you will get the notifications when these come out as well. Even if I'm already emailing you this stuff, it's a helpful piece. But my mission is to know that I'm not just making a picture here and it's out there in nowhere land, but that people are actually feeling it. People are actually getting this, and it's changing the way that people experience their lives, not just, watching a movie and then forgetting about it the next day. So if you could be my partner in that, I'd be so grateful for that. And no matter what, I will see you tomorrow in day 4 of week 1 of certification. Take care.